Welcome, and today we're going to explore some ancient civilizations in North America. We're actually going to begin in New York City looking at some of the older buildings that were torn down. And the second part of the video we will explore some Google Earth and check out some ancient lines spread out all over the coastline that I believe show traces of an ancient civilization. So stay tuned, I hope you enjoy. On a little quest once again. This all began for me while actually preparing the video that should be released before this one. And I was doing some research on the Call Building as I had featured it in my video. And I wanted to see what the story was with the Call Building in present times. So I had a look here. The Call Building was in San Francisco, and what we see is that it was struck by the 1906 earthquake and actually sustains damage, but not really that much, you know. All the windows blew out and it caught fire after the earthquake, but it remained standing. And they end up renovating it to some extent, and then it sits dormant for about 30 years. Nobody does anything with it. And then we have this story of its purchase in which the new owner reduces the amount of stories, and they change the name of the building to the Speckle Building, and present day it's called Central Tower, and here it is. I mean, nothing to do with what it used to, you know, this amazing piece of architecture. And yes, at one point it was 315 feet and later was reduced. Here it is in its true glory before the renovations. And why would you renovate? You know, this is not a renovation, what you see here. And it was really interesting actually because, you know, their story is that they reduced 290 feet and they reduced the number of stories. Whereas there was 15 floors, they increased it to 21 floors. So also very interesting. I mean, these, again, as we see in the old architecture, we have giant ceilings and giant floors, and the new owner reduced the size of the floors and was able to squeeze an extra 6 floors into this building, removing the dome and just making it hideous, actually, just hideous compared to this. So we don't see a renovation, we see a reduction. And here again is a picture of what it used to look like, and even the building next to it. I mean, just again, just an amazing era. It also brought me to the idea of the destruction of buildings and just how ridiculous, you know, our narrative is that a lot of these buildings are built in the 1900s only to be destroyed 10, 20, 30 years later. I mean, again, are we just a people that can afford to, you know, build and destroy in this fashion? It just doesn't make sense. But the story is for this beautiful building is that it was built in 1896 by this Helen Gillender, the millionaire and daughter of a tobacco merchant that lived from 1810 to 1877. And the story is that she built this building, and the construction contract was awarded to Charles Willis Company and this ironworks company very suspicious already of ironworks companies. And it was occupied by several financial firms through its short lifetime and was perceived as economically obsolete from the start. There were no notable incidents other than 2 lightning strikes in its spires in 1897 and May of 1900. Now, demolition began in 1910. So again, let's run this over again. The building is completed in 1897. Okay. Now, 1897. Now forget about this story. Let's just forget about this story. The building is completed in 1897, and here are photos of the sequence of deconstruction images in 1910. So we're to believe that, 12 or 13 years this building existed. That this was not here before. Now we have no photos in a very short amount of time, in a 13-year period. Notice here there are no photos of the construction of this fine, fine piece of architecture. But we have 5 photos of the deconstruction of this beautiful building. Exactly what you would expect, the kind of photos you would expect for any of these buildings when it comes to the construction. But here is what I believe is some kind of a proof, because there's no excuse for having no cameras. It's a 13-year gap from build to demolition. And here it is. There is no excuse in a 13-year period. And in fact, even though they said the building was fireproof and had never experienced any fire, that was not the problem. It was pretty much an eyesore. Well, here we do see fire in this picture. I don't know if that's just the shadowing, but there could have been a fire, and then the deconstruction could have began with a fire, just burning out whatever was in this building. And in fact, if I am correct, this may have been the building that Nikola Tesla lived in. And please let me know. And that could be a lot of the reasoning behind the destruction of this building and the burning of everything inside of it. And this will require more investigation, but really fascinating. And so here we're going to have a look at the New York World Building, which was built around 1889 on Park Row in New York City. It was originally called the Pulitzer Building, and Mr. Joseph Pulitzer commissioned it. It was the winner of several competitions in the tallest building of New York City for about 5 years. It was the first city's building to surpass the 280-foot spire of the Trinity Church, which at the time dominated the city's skyline. The World Building was demolished in 1955 for the expanded car ramp entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge. So, this building basically survives for about 60 years. 60 years, one of the most beautiful buildings in the vicinity here. I mean, if we're looking at this building right here, these are photos from the early 1900s, and they say the building was built in the late 1800s. No, this is not a 10-year-old building, or even 15, or even 20. Okay, and we're going to start out this Google exploration right here off the coast of Oregon. And I want to recap what I was discussing on our last Google exploration about the artificial sandbars. And here's a little artificial sandbar, just a little one, and I was showing some up here in Alaska, way in the middle of nowhere, where nobody would ever have any interest in building sandbars to protect communities. But today we're going to focus on this little sandbar in Oregon. And what we can see is this tiny little chunk of artificial, and I don't think anybody would dispute that this is an artificial chunk here of land, so perfect and smooth and straight, creating a nice little port. But this little piece, I've put the ruler on it, and it's 27 miles. So, I chose a small example to show how not so small this artificial chunk actually is. 27 miles. And, what would it take to build 27 miles of land? Surely there would be some record of such a feat of engineering. And yet this is a tiny one. This is absolutely tiny. And we find these on the coasts of all countries. And I'm not going to get into that today, but I just wanted to start off here. So this is just the prequel to where I'm going to take you next. But just as a quick refresher, I want to take you to this New Mexico pattern that I shared in another video recently. Now this is an example. I mean, look at this, swirling kind of double helix looking pattern. Not the easiest way to lay out a subdevelopment. And this too is about, 15 miles. If you were going to speculate and build homes, you might start with a little section, a few miles or, quarter mile, but not well over 15 miles of laying out neighborhoods. And again, this would not be the best way to lay out neighborhoods. This would just be ridiculous. Really, really ridiculous. And this to me is signs of an ancient civilization. And, I was recently watching a video by Lone Eagle, and Lone Eagle did a showcase on a lot of these artificial coastlines, an excellent showcase, and I'll leave a link below. And he really takes you, all over the place, showing you the artificial coastlines. And then later in the video, what he does is takes us to this place that I'm going to show you right now. And this is in New Jersey. And this is, just 5 minutes from Atlantic City. So here you have Atlantic City, which is absolutely artificial. An artificial landmass. Or it was once connected to the greater landmass, and something happened and cleaned this out. But if we look carefully, there are traces of civilization here. And again, I've taken off roads. There are no roads highlighted. This is completely what we would see flying overhead in a plane. Very unnatural formations. And we can have a look over here, not far, and we see the same things. People aren't building here, but we see the same things in the deserts of Nevada You know, these right angles and these straight lines. And you know, these are a little different. They're a little different, but at the same time, I think they're very similar. And here we can have another look. Now pay notice to the neighborhood here. Obviously where people are living. But what I want you to focus on is everything surrounding it. Everything here is artificial. I mean, look at this. How can people live so close to things like this and pay no notice? How much more obvious could it be? I mean, a quick glance. I mean, if I lived here, I'd want to look at my home from Google Earth, and immediately I would begin to question, what is this? And what is the explanation for this? And I would love to hear your comments. You know, in a lot of videos, people tell me these are salt farms and, you know, in other locations. But I don't know. I'm really curious to see what anybody might say about this. And again, look at the size. I mean, this is miles and miles and miles of artificial something. And again, I can never and would not ever say that I know what this is. But I do know what it's not, and it's not natural. And it has nothing to do with our present circumstance. This is out in the wild. And what happened here? I mean, I've never seen anything, any research. Really, I mean, this is amazing. And this is not out in the middle of the remote Nevada desert. Let's see how many miles this is from Atlantic City. So it looks like 13 miles away from Atlantic City. You know, this is a very populated area here. You know, again, this is not the deserts of Nevada, you know. And absolutely fascinating. And I think we'll have to do a little bit more research into this. And again, I would love to get some feedback on this. So here are the coordinates down below. Anyone can check them out, and let me put the roads back on so everyone can get a little reference of how to access this location. And finally, I'll just wrap it up with this little thing that I've called a resonator in the middle of this anomalous site. And this was just really interesting. You know, it reminded me of, you know, a lot of the magnetrons and the microwaves and the cymatic patterns and the windows in the cathedrals, and this to me seemed like a resonating pattern. But that's it for today. I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.